Welcome to another episode of the King's Couch. I'm your host, Sulo King, and today we're doing a special Zoom edition with my buddy George, who's already been a guest on the show, and his dear friend, actor and entrepreneur, Donal Logue. Donal, thank you for joining us today.
Man, thank you, Sulo. Thank you for everything. And George, it's so good to see you. When you first mentioned the possibility about doing this, I was so excited, and not because of the circumstances, which are so tough, but because of, I think, something that we had spoken about privately, Sulo, is that, George and I have been friends since we were 6th, 7th, 8th grade, when we were 10, 11, 12, 13, and no matter how many years pass and where our independent journeys take us in life, like, you never forget and the importance of those bonds, and that's something that George and I have, something that we've always maintained, whether our stories took us in different directions in life. And so I'm so grateful to be here and humbled by this. And I any way that we can get, and not only just rally around the predicament George is dealing with right now, but just everybody has a story, and everybody's story is so important. And it's through sharing our stories that we can grow ourselves. And, I welcome this opportunity to hear about more of George's story from when our paths kind of diverged when he left El Centro when he was young. But, George and I come from this town called El Centro, California. I know you know it, Sulo. But for the other listeners, it's a small town on the Mexican border, kind of tucked in the corner of California near Arizona. And it's a couple of hours from San Diego, which was, of course, the big city destination for us. And, and it was funny because if you were from El Centro, it wasn't like the coolest place in the world to be from when you went up to San Diego. You know what I mean? Like
pass through El Centro, you don't live there.
Oh yeah, you pass through El Centro and you say to yourself, how can people live here?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, people have made a choice. It's 124 degrees in the summer, and it's certainly not a glamorous place, but it's an amazing place full of amazing people. And that's where our friendship was forged. And I know George moved up to, San Diego and became a fixture in Ocean Beach and Pacific Beach, and is well loved in that community. He's certainly well loved in our community. And George will tell you that there's a huge group of us from the Imperial Valley who stay in touch. And if social media has any benefit, any whatsoever, it's that ability to stay in touch with people from your past, and more important, the people who know you from how you came up and who you are, because that's who we are in life, not fronting who we became in adult life or what our jobs or our positions or titles are. It's like when we were all kids standing on the track, in PE at Wilson Junior High School, and dealing with the big stuff in life that happens, that as kids we were, dealing with at the time. And George's journey is spectacular. He's always been such a loving, open, big-hearted person. So yeah, when you guys threw me this opportunity, I was like, I cannot wait. I can't wait.
So let's talk a little bit about the roots, like how you guys met originally. Are you born and raised in El Centro? Let's talk about a little bit about your background and work our way up to that point where you met George and how you guys clicked and became such good friends.
Well, El Centro for me was, one of the, I don't know if it was like the 8th stop in my journey in life. Like, I was born in Canada. My parents are from Ireland. George knows all that, knows my family. And we moved around New England, and when we emigrated to the United States, and then my dad started working in Mexico, starting in Nogales, Sonora, on the Arizona side of things. And we lived there. And then we moved to a town called Calexico. And then we moved to El Centro. And that's when I met George, you know, and you couldn't miss George. Like, you can't miss George. Incredibly handsome, charismatic guy. And George had this unbelievable, like, carbon can, you know how carbon can connect with any other chemical substance. Like, George was this centerpiece. He could, El Centro is a primarily Hispanic town. And George was like this glue that kept all these different disparate groups together. He was incredibly close with all the cholos. He was really close with all of us who were like racing BMX bikes and doing all that kind of stuff. And he was just kind of the well-loved guy who could stand in the middle of all these disparate elements of this community and be like when you say, I mean, George wouldn't say this for himself, so I'll say it for him, but he can be like this incredible joining force who could, you know, if you were coming up to a group of people, because back then in the 70s, there were kind of hard, George, you'd say this, right? There were hard lines drawn between different groups. Like, you were a white boy, or you were a cholo, you were an East Sider, or you were from Heber Trece, or you were from Brawley. And if you were with George, it was like, okay, a friend of George is a friend of ours. I'm telling you, even in situations that could be, you know, it was kind of a fighting town, you know, so so your friendship with George might save your ass a little bit, you know?
Hey, growing up with a name like mine, I got fucked with all the time. And I had people like George in my corner.
Well, see, now you can explain that, because George probably played a similar role in your life when he moved, you know, when he's relocated to San Diego. And I know he was like that. I know, because I have a friend named Jason, who I worked with not too long ago on a television series. Super cool guy who works in the transport department in LA. And we bonded immediately because he knew I was friends with George, and he did the same thing. He told me about how George kind of, you know, George stepped in a couple of situations in San Diego that were pretty hairy for him. And he will always be grateful, as will I. And that's such a test of friendship, that level of loyalty and courage.
It's like a diplomat amongst the people.
Yeah,
and in the music scene, that's how I was. So, like, real quick, you know, when I grew up, I was, you know, messed with my entire life. My father was an alcoholic. My parents got divorced, typical stereotypical story. And when I got a little sense of authority running nightclubs, the gears switched real quick, and that popularity, going from a follower to leader that I always wanted, I was like, man, this is so fake. Like, these people forget so quick that, hey, you ripped me off for a dime bag of weed back in the day, you know, or you were, you know, talking shit behind my back, and think that I didn't remember that when the, you know, the cooler kids than us were like, oh, you're friends with that loser? Like, no. And, you know, meeting George, like it reminds me of RJ. I still talk to him. His name's Ryan Matthews. So shout out to Ryan Matthews if you watch this, but you always have my back, and I'll never forget that. And hearing George talk about you, about how he used to stand up for you and so many others, just like really resonated with me. And it's crazy how close George and I have become, like in the last 6 months that we've been working alongside each other. We went from more like acquaintance, like we know each other, but do we really know each other? Yeah. Now we are starting to really get to know each other. And I love the synergy that we have. And he's told me so much about how you guys go back. I don't even know how many years, like what, 40 something years? Or
we go back, like, I think 40, I think we go back almost like 44 years.
Okay. Yeah. And it's
45, almost 45 years.
I don't, you know, I'm 41 and I barely have any friends from my childhood that I keep in contact with on a regular basis and have the type of best friendship that you guys still have. And I think that's such a beautiful and important thing. And, you know, especially with, you know, where you went with your career and what's going on now, especially with George, you having that kind of selfless and big heart of wanting to do whatever it takes to help them, no matter how busy your schedule is. I know this is all a game of timing, and like, I can't thank you enough again for coming on here and taking the time to do this and just share your story.
Hey, now, Sulo, George, and maybe people who had seen the previous one, but George, why don't you fill everybody in on a little bit of your journey, your trajectory,
We can just basically give us a quick recap. And for those of you that want to hear like the full story of his, battle with heart congestion failure and his transplant up until that point, can tune into episode 2 of our podcast. But George, why don't you give us a quick recap of where you're at now?
Yeah, I think it was about 2010 that I got diagnosed with congestive heart failure and AFib. And it kind of went on for a little while, the pressure in my heart, the percentage that it was pumping at, like at one point it was down to 43, then it went down to 33, then it went down to 23, and then finally, ultimately, before I got my heart transplant, it was at 13%. And I was still working out. I think I was going to the gym about 3 times a day, riding my bike 40 miles a day. And the doctors just could not believe that I was doing so much with my heart only pumping so low. They were like, we just can't believe that you're doing all of this stuff. And one of the guys in the gym that was like a physical fitness guy was telling me, it really goes to show that your will is stronger than anything in us humans. And that's the type of will that you have, that you're not willing to take no for an answer, and you're going to continue to fight. And I think it was maybe 2 years ago that things started getting really bad, and they put a pacemaker in. And then I think 6 months later, they put another pacemaker in. It was right around the time that COVID had started. And they put this defibrillator in that they had like controls on it, so they could control my blood pressure because it kept going up really high. And then they cauterized my heart a little bit. And after that, they sent me to the doctor that was kind of controlling this thing that they had put in me. And he said, your heart's getting really bad. And I just want to let you know that ultimately you're going to have a heart transplant, which scared the hell out of me, because I was like, yeah, I don't want heart transplant. I want this heart. This is the heart that I'm used to. So it's just kind of a big thing. And sometimes, for some people, it's a lot to take in. And he ended up referring me over to UCSD and Dr. Wetterstein and the heart transplant team there. And as soon as I got there, they were just all very welcoming. I cannot say enough about UCSD as a whole. They're just such awesome people. And right from the beginning, they told me, you know what, if you need a heart tomorrow, we're going to get it for you. And the more they got to know me, and I would tell them my story, that I was in recovery. And at that time I had about 3.5 years sober, and they were just so stoked on like, man, that is so awesome. And that's going to really help with you getting the new heart. And especially because you're in such good shape, the heart is going to be able to take to your body a lot better. So, as I continued on through the process, I had to jump through a bunch of hoops. The whole time it's like you start living in this fear and anxiety of what's going to happen. Am I going to live? Am I going to die? Because when you start thinking they're going to saw my chest down the middle, they're going to open it up with these rib spreaders, they're going to take my heart out, and then they're going to put this other heart in. And who knows what kind of heart I'm going to get? I mean, is it going to be an old guy? Is it going to be a, whatever? And next thing you know, as I'm, going through the process, right when COVID started, I got really sick. And I mean, I had never been sick like that before. And I ended up in the hospital again. And little by little, I got better. And then once we started getting through the heart process, it was like, okay, I'm going to go through this, I'm going to get this done, because they said, are you willing to have a heart transplant? But I'm like, it's a no brainer. Like, I got a 6-year-old daughter. I got a fiance, like, I want to live. And they said, well, a lot of people turn it down. And once I ended up getting the heart, I realized why people turn it down, because it's a lot to take on, and if you read my posts in the early days, when I first got the heart transplant and I got out of the hospital, I was literally writing down everything that I was feeling. And everybody was like, dude, you're so inspirational. You're the GOAT. You're a champion. All these things that they were saying. And at that time, I couldn't see anything. I just wanted to live. But you're going through so much emotionally, physically, the pain, and plus the anxiety and the fear and blah, 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 and on and on and on. And then I couldn't sleep. Like the first 10 days after I got the heart, I wasn't able to sleep. I was delirious. So then I started thinking, you know what? Now I know why people turn it down, because this is a lot to take on. You know, some people rather just go out naturally, you know, okay,
Right.
God decided I need to leave this earth, I'm going to leave. But there was no way. You know, I love my friends, I love my family and that little girl so much that
Yeah.
there's no way that I was going to go out that way. And, you know, finally, I think it was January the 7th, they put me on the heart transplant list. And 3 weeks later, I got called in. They flew the heart here from Colorado, and it ended up being a bad heart. And they sent me home. And I was really bummed. But at the same token, I was like, well, you know what? At least I know they care, and they're not going to just
Right.
do the surgery and put this bad heart in me.
No, of course. Yeah.
Right. So then 3 weeks to the day when I got sent home, they called me again on that Friday morning, and they said, hey, we need you to get to the hospital. We have a heart for you. And they tricked me because they didn't want me to get all fearful again.
Yeah.
So they said I was second in line. And I went there, and they got me in the gown and did the blood work. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden the doctors come in and they're like, all right, you ready? And I was like, wait a minute, I thought I was going to go home. And I had had all these premonitions of how I thought it was going to be. And it's a trip, because I jumped off the table. I gave Colette a hug, told her I loved her. And I walked down the hall with the doctors, and it was like nothing what I had imagined
Wow.
that it was going to be like, right? Because I thought they were going to wheel me in on a gurney, and I was going to see the lights passing. And they walked me in, and I jumped up on the table, and they took off my shirt. And next thing you know, I laid down, and they said, what kind of music you like? And I said, oldies. So they put on 92.5 and started jamming some oldies for me. And I just remember, man, a tear just came out of my eye, because, you know, I didn't know if I was going to wake up.
Yeah.
And this nurse just put his hand on my shoulder and said, you know what? You're going to be okay. You have the best doctors in the world. You're going to wake up in a few hours, and you're going to have a new heart. And at that time, I didn't know that I was getting a 22-year-old heart. But next thing you know, I woke up in the hospital bed. I had all these tubes and things on my head, and a big old tube sticking out of my chest to drain the blood, and these wires that were stuck to me that were like going to the heart. And I just look over, and I see Colette, and I was like, I'm alive. I made it, you know? And then the process of healing started happening. And I looked on Facebook one day, and it was like 400 comments and messages of just people saying the nicest things that I can imagine to me, that they were praying for me, thinking about me, that people were going to the church, lighting candles. And it was just so awesome, man. Like just thousands and thousands of people, man. Just that love literally was helping me, like just kept me going, you know, in the beginning. It was so awesome. And then, you know, you hooking me up with Jimmy Franzo, and he was.
Yeah, that's an important, you know, so recovery is a big part of what another bond that George and I share. And how it works is when you kind of, just like your body being healthy enough to accept the new heart because you were working through it. Like, you know, I have my own stuff with substance abuse issues and addiction. And, you know, hit a really low point at 25 in the Imperial Valley again. And then I surrendered, and I turned my life around. And, you know, I remember I was doing a job, or I went down to the Valley for something, and I hadn't talked to George for a long time because he had moved out of LA. I'd gone off to college in Boston and moved to London and New York and crazy stuff. And I was like, you know what, you need to go to I'll keep it anonymous, right? But you need to go to this group of people that, go and share each other's stories and experience strength and hope. And you need to check in. And so I went to this place that was by the old sheriff's department to a meeting, and bam, there's George. It's like, whoa, dude, it's been so long, and yet no time has passed, you know? And so by doing that, when you get off your butt and you're like, I'm going to go do something to better myself and not just sit here and wallow in my own stuff, then life puts you back in contact with people like George. And through that world, years later in LA, I met this friend named Jimmy, incredible human being, like one of the greatest guys you could ever meet. And he had gone through George's, he had previously gone through what George is going through now. And so when George was going through it and dealing with the trepidation and the fear, et cetera, I said, whoa, I'm going to reach out to my buddy Jimmy. And then take it from there, George. Explain that relationship.
Yeah, Jimmy had reached out to me and Donald hooked us up, and he had just walked me through the process of what was going to happen, what I could expect. And it just made such a difference, you know, because him explaining to me, this is what's going to happen. I mean, in a way, it kind of scared me because he started telling me worst case scenario, especially things that happened to him during his thing. You know, he got addicted to the pain pills and he had to have an LVAD, which I had explained to everybody on my post that was one of the options too, is that they couldn't find a heart. They put this machine in you and it has like a big like metal piece that comes out of your stomach and it attaches to batteries. And so you have to have the batteries charged. And I was like, no way, dude, I just want a heart. I don't want that machine because you can get a blood clot in it. And if it shoots up into your heart, it can kill you. And, you know, Jimmy started telling me that he had that LVAD machine on and
did for a long time.
Yeah. And he got through it. But that's the thing that I kept looking at. And when he would explain to me, you're going to get through this, you know, I'm going to help you. And like you said, him being in recovery, it helped me too, to identify. And I would call him every time I would get scared. I was having these bad panic and anxiety attacks before the surgery, which ever since I got the heart, I haven't had one, which is awesome. But before that, when I was talking to Jimmy, I would get so scared and worked up, and I would call him, hey man, I'm scared. This is what I'm going through. And he would drop everything. He would be filming because he also acts like Donald. He does voiceover stuff. And he would stop in the middle of whatever he was doing up in LA and go outside and say, hey man, remember I told you, I don't care what I have going on, I will always make time for you.
Wow.
And that made me feel so safe and so like, wow, like here's this dude that's stopping everything he's got going. And he has all these like star clients that he helps work out and is like kind of like a life coach. And so for him to make time for me was like, that's a good dude to have on my team. And he literally walked me up all the way until I got the transplant. And he's one of the first people that called me after I received the heart. That was like, hey, remember I told you you'd be okay? And I was like, you did everything that he said. It's like, I only have two people like that I have, and that's him and Kevin Zinger, the guy that owns SRH that also started the bracelets and everything we had going. You know, he's my best friend. We've been best friends for 30 years. And I do the same with him. Every time I'm having any kind of issue, I'm scared, I'm going through life's problems, he's another one that I call, and he just calms me down. His demeanor and the way of looking at things is like, listen, you're going to be okay. Just breathe. And sometimes I laugh and I'm like, fucker, like, you know, I kind of want to get mad at him, and then I laugh because I'm like, dude, that's exactly what I need to do. I need to breathe and just relax because everything is going to be okay. And, you know, especially, you know, when I went through rejection a couple of months ago, it was super hard because I thought, okay, well, I'm going to die now, you know, and then I ended up walking through that. And then obviously, you know, we got a call today that I'm in rejection again, and we're going to walk through it again. It's just part of the process. And by having all these people in my life and having the good Lord looking up above, taking care of this issue, because that's another thing is that Jimmy would always say, you know, these doctors can only do so much, but there's only one dude in charge, and that's the man upstairs. And he will decide the day that you need to leave. And today's not the day.
Right.
And that right there just means so much to me, you know, to have someone like that in my life to continue to put things into perspective and keep me going down the right path, you know, and not get sidetracked by fear, anxiety, or what's going on with this person in my life or that person or this problem or that problem, or we're not getting along and whatever. It's like in this big scheme of things, the only thing that matters is that we're alive today and we're able to sit here, have this podcast, carry this message, and talk about our youth, talk about, you know, all the things that we went through, you know, when we were young, like when you got hit on that bike. Things could have ended for you that day. And I remember Tim Jesse coming to school and then telling us about you getting hit on the bike because he was there. And, you know, you were my best friend at the time in 7th grade. And I thought, man, I'm going to lose my best buddy, you know, because every day I'd see you and we'd smile and laugh and joke around and goof on people and do whatever we were doing. And then it's like, he's in the hospital, he's going to be okay. And then, you know, all of a sudden it's like, well, let's go visit him. And they're like, well, you can't visit him yet.
That's the craziest story, Sulo. Did you know this story?
Oh, no. How old were you guys when this happened?
We were 7th grade.
No,
I think,
actually 12. It was eighth grade Christmas. It was Christmas because it was the day after the Christmas Mile, this running race that I won. We used to have this big running race at our junior high school that was like this big thing every year. And then the next day I was riding my bike and I was at my friend Scott Koreski's house, rest in peace, Scott. And I forgot my index cards. We had a big, you know, of course I left it to the last minute to write a big school report or whatever. So I said, oh man, I'm going to go, I'm at Scott's house. And I said, before we go to the library, I got to ride back to my house and get my index cards. And he was like, have a sandwich, dude. I made you a sandwich. And I got on my bike and I was riding down the sidewalk and he goes, have a sandwich, bitch. I'm telling you. And I go, dude, I'm going to come right back. And I went off into the street. And I glanced up and I saw this car doing like 50, you know, boom. And I remember flying through the air and it was really gnarly because I had a bunch of compound fractures. And, you know, and Tim was there, I just remember this huge group of all these kids because it was like, it was action, you know, it was like this action packed thing. And they cut my pants off and my bones were sticking out and super intense thing. And they didn't have a doctor in town. El Centro's pretty rural. So they had to wait for someone from San Diego to come down in 6 hours. And it was, and you know, at that point I was an athlete. Like that was my life. George remembers that was my thing. And it looked, and that was kind of the end of that thing for my life. But I was so low and I was in the hospital and they were monitoring all the bleeds. And I didn't know they were talking about amputating a leg. And so one day the nurse comes, this was a few weeks into it. And my spirits were so gone. And she said, hey, you have some visitors. Would you like to see somebody? And I go, you know what? No, I can't deal with it. Not today, you know? And she goes, well, they're just going to be here. They're just outside the window. They just want to wave and say hi. Okay. So I swear, this is insane. I go to they wheel me over to the window. They open up the curtains and George and all of dude, I don't even know how many kids are there from our junior high school. And they have this brand new Torker. Like they all pitched in their lunch money and they built this $400 BMX bike. This beautiful bike, like the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I mean, quarters and dimes and nickels.
Every day, everybody would save their lunch money. And it was me and 2 other people. I can't remember who it was. And we were sitting around in the courtyard and we were thinking about you being in the hospital. And we said, you know what? Let's everybody save their lunch money and start pitching in. And we had a jar in the office at the principal's office. And every day, everybody come in there, put their lunch money or any money they had and just kept saving and saving. And next thing you know, we took it to Miss Kaler and I talked to Miss Kaler and told her, look, Donald's in the hospital. We're all saving our lunch money and we're going to get enough to get him this bike, you know, so he can have his bike back. And I remember me and Heber sat at the bike shop and put it together. And Miss Kaler had a lot to do with it. She was so awesome and thought that it was so awesome of what we were doing.
I'm so stunned and I'm so humbled and I want to cry about this. What junior high school in the world does this stuff happen at? You know what I mean?
That's like something you see in an 80s movie.
Dude, it's a movie.
Yeah,
It's
big
a movie.
time.
It makes me cry.
It's amazing.
And you know, and George, you know, with like all of our friends down there, Christy and Todd White and Brian Martin and you know, we have this community of people, and it was you know, like people are like, what's your hometown like? And I'm like, man, how loving. Who does that happen to? You know, and that is the bond. That's the stuff. That is the stuff that you know, Sulo, I think you were talking about when you were talking about coming on this podcast, and that's who George was. What 13-year-old kid, you know, in 1979, who has scrounged up $1.55 to go to the Wiener Schnitzel is going to forego that on a daily basis to help out some kid, you know, who they don't even necessarily know if I'm going to be able to ride a bicycle again. You know?
Yeah. Well, you know, for our listeners now, George needs our help.
Yeah.
Yes. And so now that's it. George did that for me. And he would do it for anybody. And you know what? And I think that's an amazing transition, because not unlike, so for the people to help out there, you did a GoFundMe. Yeah. And I know also on the back door, for some of us who are more in the know, that, you know, we could do some PayPal stuff or something that's not, for people, for GoFundMe is a safer, or maybe people who don't know us intimately know that that's like the route to go or something. George and I were talking about it, but it doesn't have to be $100 or $800 or something like that. It's kind of like a bunch of kids collecting as much as they can, and just as many people donating a little, because George obviously hasn't been able to work. You know, he's got a 6-year-old, you know, and of course, when someone's going through something in terms of physical health so devastating as George, no one can really work. No one, you know, it's full-time care. They have to be full-time helping George. And so now George needs our help. And for all the people, and I'm not talking about OB, and this is my personal appeal, not just those of us who are familiar with Ocean Beach, a place I love and George loves.
Or San Diego, period.
And San Diego. And spreading out for Mission and OB and, you know, beyond El Cajon. And for people who for anyone who, even if anyone's been like, dude, I kind of enjoyed Blade. You know what I mean? Like, well, if you enjoyed Blade, hey,
that's
man.
Funny you said that, because I was telling him that's how I first discovered you, was that movie. And I worked at a movie theater when that movie came out. I was like, I like this guy. I like Steven Dorff's sidekick.
Yeah.
Why did they have to kill him off?
Oh, I'll tell you a crazy, and like, if we can all get together and help George. I remember going to you know, so we would go to Mission in the summertime, and my family's Irish, like Irish accent, Irish, freckly, pale. I just wasn't built for the beach. You know what I mean? Like, I'm the redheaded dude. Like George remembers, just crazy red. I look like the
Scandinavian, so I'm not built for the beach either. Bro.
I was like the Children of the Corn dude, you know, at the beach. And then like we were outside of we were near Hamels, right? In the parking lot near Hamels. And kids were doing like bike tricks and skateboard stuff. And I'm standing there, and I had a skateboard called the Black Knight, which was a wooden board with clay wheels.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody was giving me shit about this skateboard. Like, this redheaded dude, I'm getting shit for the skateboard, the freckles, the red hair. I don't know anybody. I'm not local. And there was an older dude. I'm probably, I don't know, 10. And there's some older dude who's like 16, who's super aggro and in my face. And he had these wild green eyes, so piercing, I'll never forget. And it was one of those, like an 80s school movie, like you know, the kid getting bullied in front of humiliated in front of a big group of people. And so in 2010, I was living back on Mission because we were doing a TV series called Terriers for FX. And me and my friend Mikey Raymond James, who was in, we rented this house in Mission, and we were walking down the beach with my kids, and we were down by Hamels. And of course, the world had kind of changed for me because now I was recognizable through my day job, you know, or whatever. And this guy comes up to me, kind of like super sun leathered, you know, like one of those prototypical like PB old timer dudes who's just living out on the beach, you know, maybe drinking too much and all this stuff. And the guy's like, blah, 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 blah. And he comes up to me and he goes, "Oh shit, bro, Blade. Oh man, I love Blade. I love Blade so much." And I'm looking at this guy and I'm kind of stunned into silence, you know? And he goes, "Yeah, dude, give me a hug." And I started walking off, and Mikey said, "Man, what's up with you?" I said, "Dude, that's intense." And he goes, "What? Getting recognized for Blade?" And I go, "No, I remember that guy. I remember his eyes. He bullied me when I was 10 years old."
Oh my God.
What a trip.
trip, dude.
You know what I mean? And he's,
Wow.
you know, of course, 30 something years later, he's still in that same spot, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But now I wasn't the dude with the Black Knight board, you know, like, but it's just life. And for all our friends out there, and life, you know, we're not a glum lot. We laugh at stuff. We deal with shit. All of us have. All of us, you know, childhood can be painful. Adults are going through bad shit and they pass it on to us. And kids, you're trying to emotionally survive. And I know that's the case with George, because I know that from our conversations we had in junior high school.
That's exactly my tagline for the show. Everybody has a story to tell. Don't judge a book by its cover.
Absolutely. And never underestimate what the hell someone else is going through or has gone through. You don't know.
That gave me the purpose. Everyone wanted me to do a music related show because I work in the industry. And I was like, they're a dime a dozen no. And after hearing this story, I'll reiterate it again. I can only do it so much because, like, bro, like I don't even think you realize the purpose you gave me. You know, I watched my mom as a socialite. She has a foundation called the Miraglow Foundation, which funds health and educational systems throughout the entire world, doing all this selfless work. And I've always wanted to emulate that. I've thrown benefits, shows, and that's just one-off stuff. But to sit here and help you in my free time, I don't even know how to put it into words. You know what I mean? Awesome. I just to see the smile on your face and how thankful you are. That's what motivates me to keep going, to want to help you out.
And Sulo, that's what feeds us spiritually, right? You want help in life, help someone else.
Very spiritual
person. If you're lonely, go comfort someone who's lonely. Like, that is the $zillion. And George knows this because George is also now friends with Danny Trejo, who's my best friend. Okay. And, you know, that's it in life. It's like, you want help, go help others. And you told me, so you knew George from the past and what a role George played in your life. And then you realized on your birthday, right?
Yeah, on my birthday is when he had his transplant. And I didn't realize that then until after the fact. And I thought about it, and I'm in the numerology and very spiritual and about fate and how people are fated to come into each other's lives. And you know, the last year and a half since we started this pandemic, everyone's bitching about this and that minuscule things. Like, I can't go to a bar during the shutdown, this and that. And I'm going online talking about, you know, we need more selflessness than selfishness. And then I see this guy, like, just navigating through the storm like a badass. And then I was like, his nickname is Braveheart. I was like, well, fuck yeah. I was like, the fact that you can come on here and so calmly talk like nothing has happened or affected you in your life is absolutely amazing. I brought him on the radio, Donal, and Tim Piles is like the mayor of music in the radio world here in San Diego. And even he said during the interview, he's all, I got to tell you, seeing a tough guy like that, just tear up and cry, like hit home with me. You know what I mean? I've never seen that before. And then George, you were telling me that the podcast that we recorded, you sent it to some of your buddies that are locked up and said that even that hit home with them.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you all this tough guy bullshit out there. Like we're all human inside. We all experience emotions. And, you know, I'm a life coach myself, and, you know, going through that whole process during the pandemic, making a transition from full-time in the music industry and being an entrepreneur. So also in another business that got wiped out during it. It was a healing experience for me. And then going from that, working as a practitioner to just simply inviting George out to have lunch just to do a kind gesture. I already kind of knew in my mind, I was like, well, I don't want to press it on him, but I want to help him. I already had made that decision. That's why I invited you out to have that lunch originally. And look at where we're at now.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
And you never, I mean, and you've said so much in that, like multitudes, you know, the tough guy shit. And like Danny Trejo, as tough as it came and as bad as he could be. And I'm so sorry, they're doing construction out here. But badass, too afraid to show your ass. Because if you're projecting that badass shit so hard, it's like, whoa, what's the fear behind that? Because man, I connect with other people because we share our human frailties with each other. Because life is going to lay you low at some point, spiritually or physically, you know, and that's when we're here to help each other, and not be afraid to say, I'm in trouble. You know, and I just had a friend, it's a terrible story. He committed suicide, and and I won't get into his personal details, but like a lot of us were rallying. A lot of us were involved in this thing, and I don't know what it was, mental illness, or I don't know what it was that made him just not say, I'm in trouble and I need help. Whatever kernel of ego will kill you. It will kill you, you know? I don't need help. I don't need this. Or, you know, I'm in this hole because of you, not because of me. And it's like, no, we make our own beds in life. And it's not always fair. You know, like something bad happens to you and you're like, well, 6-year-old kids get cancer. Well, what did they do? Right? It doesn't work that way. I mean, what's crazy about George's story is, I swear to God, when George says his heart was pumping at 13% and he was riding 40 miles, I know why, because George has always had a heart that's 10 times its normal size in terms of giving. You know what I mean? So it doesn't, in a weird way, it doesn't surprise me. And if this is an opportunity, and I know it's humbling for George to even need help. It was humbling for me because I wasn't that person who got stuff, you know, and I'm self-sufficient, and George knows my background. He knows my financial background. He knows where my family's from. We didn't have that side of life, you know? And so to receive, it takes so much strength to be able to receive, right? Because we're so used to just being like, no. And so in this case, what we're trying to do is share the story of 3 human beings coming together and sharing some of their experience, strength, hope, and laughs with each other, and how friendship can endure, and how friendship can deepen, and how bonds can strengthen. And the after effect, if people watching this want to pitch in, and I pray that they will, and I know that they will, and want to help George in this kind of tricky phase of his physical journey, because I know George is going to be back out there doing his thing, and it's just about getting through this hump, right?
Well, George,
Yeah.
you know, like my mother and her business partner have already agreed to help him out pro bono, and already connected him with one of their friends and colleagues who had a heart transplant 20 years ago, and now has a support group for people like George.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's already connected with that woman. And why don't you talk a little bit about that recent connection with Laura Fine? for a second.
Yeah, she's a really cool person. She has these groups that she does, kind of like life coach, guides you through, things that you're going through. And it's really awesome. Like right when I spoke to her, she said that she had heard my podcast with Sulo. And she was like, right when I heard your story, I was like, I'm going to help this guy. She's all, you have a heart of gold. I could tell by the way that you speak. She's all, you did something to me during that podcast. I could feel you when you were speaking your words. And it was just it was just an awesome thing to like connect with this lady that I don't even know. I mean, obviously Sulo knows her, but I've never met her. And knowing that she's had a heart transplant, knowing that she's been where I've been and that she helps people, because that's what I was going to say too, is ultimately that's all I want to do. Even before this happened, I mean, you've known me my whole life. Yeah. I've always helped people. I've always come to the rescue. I have that protective instinct. I grew up on the east side of El Centro. I got picked on, I bullied all through elementary school. And it's like, now I stand up for others. When I see somebody getting bullied, I'm the first one to jump to their aid, even if I don't know them. It's like, hey, do that to me. Pick on me. I've done it out front. There's, a lot of homeless around here. And one day this guy's out there yelling at this Mexican guy that you could tell he was just picking up his cans and he didn't even speak English. And this guy's out there and I heard somebody yelling and I walk out there with no shirt on. And I was like, looked at the Mexican guy and I'm all, is he talking to you in Spanish? And he's all, yeah, like real humble, and I started yelling at the dude and I said, hey man, I'm all, don't you ever speak to him like that. I said, this man deserves respect. And I said, do that to me. And he's like, oh, no, man. He's
no, I prefer to do it to him.
Yeah, I said, apologize to him. And he apologized. And I said, that's not what we do. We help one another. We talk to each other with respect. And,
George, that's amazing because it's a teachable moment too, right? Because bullies are hurt people. And there was one guy who used to he really was making my life a little bit of a after school special living hell, And I remember riding my bike through town and I saw him and his pops and I saw them in some drive-through restaurant, for a fast food drive-through thing. And I witnessed one of the gnarliest, most brutal cases of a kid getting beaten by their parent. And as a young kid, a light went off in my head. I go, oh my God, this guy's just transferring the pain he's getting from another person who that probably happened to them when they were a kid. And it's a cycle, and I think by shaming like bullies in a weird way, and they definitely need to think to themselves and feel that humility or not to humiliate someone, but go, this isn't how we do this. And in reality, I don't think it's who you want to be as a human being. Let's be better than this. And then we really learn to grow together. But there's nothing bigger in life when you're young and there's a ring of screaming people around you waiting for the gladiatorial blood contest, you know what I mean? And you're scared and you're scared about being humiliated, not physical pain, because I don't think any of us care about, we've been through a lot of physical pain. It's just reputation and where you are in school and how you're thought of by your peers. And when someone steps up and says something in those moments, you know who they are as a human being. And it takes a lot of courage to do that, I don't think any journey of mine in life, with the exception of the difficulty of being a father and the amazing responsibilities that come with parenting. And, but I don't think certainly none of my career crap, since I started working in this industry has been 1/90th as hard as potentially an afternoon in front of the Circle K in El Centro, California.
Yeah.
When you come out and some dude wearing like a shower cap and rollers in his hair is sitting on your bike and they're like, this is my bike now. You know what I mean? And you're like, and what you gonna do? Yeah. And I think all of us can relate to that. And if the people watching this and sharing in this who can relate and laugh at these stories of our childhood, but know that, George was the guy who gave. And when I was at my lowest point in the hospital, and it was, I think, George, right, it was like another 8 months after that I was in traction and I couldn't move around even with crutches. And so at the lowest point in my life, where it felt like my dreams had been taken away, to feel the love of that community that was spearheaded by Tim, Jesse, and George, and those people from my hometown, it made me feel like there was nothing I couldn't deal with in life, and that I mattered, that you had had some impact on people, enough to make them care. And I think, I just, George is, I can't thank him enough. I can't thank him enough. Like this stuff is, I was so, when you guys mentioned the possibility of doing this, I just was like, wow. And I think from these seeds, great things grow, right? Sulo, just the way that you conduct your life, and like you were blessed in certain ways, not, it was a lot of work, but you developed your own world in San Diego, and you had things going on, you were entrepreneurial, but you're not just using that to amass stuff for you, right? You want to be a river back to your community and give back what you get.
That's what I did when I owned a recording rehearsal studio. So I was a concert promoter. That's how I started. Actually, security guard, and then by age 22, I hit a president here in San Diego. I was the youngest person in my age bracket, still to this day, actually, that started running the booking department for, a club at that stature. And I got ridiculed. So I felt picked on again for the second time in my life. But then I started earning my street credit and gaining the respect. And people saw that I wasn't playing around, that no matter like how much I was called a politician or a sellout or whatever, because I'm a musician making that transition on the other side, I didn't.
Oh, come on.
Give a fuck. That's the name Authentic Sellout. That's where that was born. This band started out as a one gig joke, and now I'm sitting here 15 years later, still fronting the same band. And, I came up with the name because it's an oxymoron. It's a contradiction. Yeah. We all want to sell out and get paid to do with what we love. And I love it. There's two things I love doing more than anything in this world, and that's entertaining people and helping people.
Yeah.
And now you get to do both in that capacity.
And entertaining people is helping people.
Well, yeah, it is. But I mean, like this.
No, but I know it's but even in what you're talking about, you were driven by a kind of a positive thing about, and that's a kind of a cool thing, is like, if you think of whatever you do, either music or helping promote artists or any job that you have, if it's being of service to other human beings in some way, I don't mean to get too, I don't want to alienate people with too much, whatever my spiritual thing is or my feeling towards a higher power, but your footsteps will be guided in the proper direction and you will be taken care of. And I love that. I love how you're inspired by that you're motivated by that, and but there is no doofier world. I was a road manager, and there's no snobbier world than music scenes wherever they happen, right?
Oh, big! I've tour managed a boy band before, and seen, like, I've experienced so much in this industry and seen every aspect of it. I think one of the snobbiest types is that arrogant actor booking their band and having to deal with that kind of shit. And I'm not going to drop any names here because you probably might know some of these people that I've worked with. But then there's people like you that are just genuine, have never changed, and you are the true definition of what an artist really is in my book. You don't let the glitz and the glamour and the bullshit get inside your head. That hasn't changed who you are. I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about your friendship of 40 plus years if that was the case. Or I wouldn't want you on my show either. No.
You know what? Honestly, I don't even know, but I will say this. And I will excuse people from it because it's a teachable moment. Somehow they learn that. But arrogance doesn't require any outside thing, right? Like, you remember arrogant people in your high school. For what? Who the hell knows? Who knows, right? Certainly the world hadn't stamped them. And people carry that kind of better than thou stuff. And it's not better than thou and it's not worse than thou. It's walking together. We're worker among workers. We're people walking together, you know, but it is, you know, and we won't waste time with the podcast with stories that name names and come up with.
Oh, yeah, we don't need to go there. Like, I mean,
when people pull the arrogant shit out, it's like, when I was in college, I remember there were two guys. There was one, a guy named Seamus Heaney, who I didn't know what he did, you know, nice old Irish guy who was very cool to me, and we'd have lunch together. And my roommate was like, dude, that's Seamus Heaney. Like, that guy's getting the Nobel Prize for literature, right? He didn't talk about what a great poet he was, regardless of whether the world considers him one of the greatest poets of all time. And this guy, Dudley Hirschbaugh, who was a Nobel Prize winning physicist, and he was a gentle man who would stop you and say, look at that butterfly. You know, he'd just be fascinated by stuff. And I'm like, if these people can be humble in the way, which also made them why they were great scientists and artists, you know, but the rest, you know, the rest of what we do, or what kind of car you drive, or any of that kind of stuff, you know, we all know that that's meaningless stuff. This is the meaningful stuff of life. And I was just lucky because I needed, in a weird way, a group of people to remind me on the daily to be like, have you helped someone today? To get out of your own shiz when you start feeling, you know, victimized, like, or you have a terminal case of self-pity where you feel like, oh, woe's me. The answer to woe's me is to have a fun, life-affirming thing. Or, you know, I know in Danny Trejo's case, he's so over the top. It's like he forces you to have a trunk full of long johns and socks to hand out to all the time. You know, it's like, if you want, and honestly, Danny would do this whether he never got famous or not. But that's his journey.
I would love to have a Zoom with all, you know, four of us, since there's three of us, with Danny on here, if we can work that out one of these days.
Yeah, Danny, we're Zooming with him. We're doing this thing for the Los Angeles Public Library today for his book that I worked on with, you know, but Danny Trejo is his book, his memoir that we published this year that I wrote with him. So it's out now. It's a remarkable story about just what we're talking about, and about friendship. And, you know, I met Danny when I first got sober. I was working as a janitor at this drug and alcohol center that was so filled with jerks, and God bless them, because everybody was brand new. So it was people like fighting, and I'm the janitor guy, right? Trying to be like the security guard or clean the bathrooms and stuff, getting crap from people. And Danny came in and he said, you were the angriest dude I'd ever met. Because I can't remember what the interaction was. And he could have been like, forget this dude, you know? But he wasn't that guy. And he said, the way life works out, you know, 30 years later, here we are. And I'm the person who he entrusted to write the story of his life with, you know? And for me and George, 42 years later, from when I was in a hospital, 42 years later, we're here today. And I'm sure for George too, it's that the little person, the person behind your eyeballs who doesn't look like you know, when I look at a picture of me as a middle-aged guy, and I'm like, whoa, I'm not that dude. I'm still that right. I'm still that kid at Wilson Junior High School. That's how we all feel, right? And it feels like that.
I still feel like a kid too. Yeah. Someone wise told me age is only as old as you feel. That was my pops. Yeah. George, you have a book you're working on. Speaking of books,
right? I've been writing a book about my journey and growing up and all the childhood trauma and you know, all the stuff that we went through when we were kids in El Centro. I mean, you can write a book just about all that stuff that we went through.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I was telling Sulo about showing up with you to your track meets, you know, to watch you run, and, you know, all the little, you know, Mexican kids, you know, trying to pick on you because they really wanted their guy to win.
Yeah.
And I remember just going to watch you to like watch your back. And, you know, because I was from the east side, they were from the east side, and I'd be like, no, it's not con me. He's with me. Like, you mess with him, you mess with me. And after that, they were like, they wouldn't mess with you. And I would show up to all your meets and cheer you on. And like you said, it's like, I will always see you as that redheaded, skinny little kid, because, you know, it's like you did something for me. You were my friend. And that's what I needed at the time, is I needed that type of friend. And I remember you even coming up to me during the day and being like, hey, how you doing? You know, and nobody ever said that back then. You know, the group we hung out with, it's not like they cared about your feelings, but you were that friend to me too. You were like, hey man, how you doing today? And I'm like, oh, I'm doing pretty good, you know? And it's like, you know, we fed off of each other and just joking around all day. We made the day go by instead of just, oh, we got to go to school. It was like, I looked forward to going to school and seeing you and Todd and, you know, all the other friends, Chicken and Sal. Yeah.
We had adventure.
Yeah, exactly. Every day. And like you said, hanging out at Circle K, that was an adventure in itself. You never knew what was going to happen, you know?
Yeah, dude.
Right.
Oh man. But I can't wait, George. We'll totally talk about your book and get into it. It's incredibly awesome and rewarding, but difficult process to put one down, you know? I'm working on one right now. You can see I've got 700 pages of just rando stuff, you know, but that story of the bike's going to be in there. And man, I can't wait to see you all in OB, you know. Like some years ago, they asked me to come back and be like the, you know, whatever the be in the Christmas parade in OB. Because
the annual one they do every year.
Yeah, I love that community so much, and I love that. When I was in El Centro, my friend Scott Kresge moved up, and he went to Grossmont High School in El Cajon, and so there used to be a Greyhound bus that would drop you off at 2nd Street in El Cajon from El Centro. And I just, to escape my life, I would take that bus up, and all of these people at Grossmont High School and took me in, you know, which is like, I'll never forget too. Like that kind of stuff is big stuff. Like life. I think life is the most difficult part of life's journey, really, is navigating the tough time of those years, you know, can be for us. But I can't thank you enough, Sulo. I knew I really had love for you before we even spoke, because I could see from a distance what you were doing with George. George's story is going to impact countless people around planet Earth. And he's going to be here for a long time to tell it and to share. And
I'm watching you like a hawk, man.
I can't wait to be part of that process.
I can't wait to meet you, man. Give you a hug in person. Like this.
I'll give you a big air hug right now, and George too.
Such a beautiful hour, just getting to know you, hearing the side, everything that he's told me about you guys, and hearing your side. And
I can't tell you how much of a beautiful soul George was, and he didn't deserve, like most people don't when they're young, some of the hard shit going on in front of them, right? And you're leaving a case of, I don't want to get into his story, but I know it was traumatic and intense. And then you have to go face the world, and you might have mean teachers, and you might have to be dealing with shit and some asshole down the street who's, you know, and still have a smile and still care and you know what? Friendship wins out. Positivity won out. Negativity and bitterness didn't win. And thank you for your community standing by and SRH. And, you know, I love how much love George gets from San Diego, because he deserves it.
100%. He's very selfless. Like I always say, can't say this enough. We need more selflessness than selfishness.
Yeah.
You know, so that takes us to the end of the podcast. And with all guests, I like to have them leave a positive affirmation, a catchphrase they use, or just some kind of affirmation for the listeners to take as we close out this episode.
Wow, that's so I come back to this thing, and in some ways on a more superficial level, but for me it operates kind of deeply. I always say, why not you, you know? Like, why not you? Good things can happen to, or why not you that you can go out and start something, or why not, you know, like take action on a daily basis, whatever it is, just keep moving and keep your feet moving and help people, and good things will happen. And, you know, I'm kind of stunned today because I went through a couple of days of as hard the kind of news and situation that we go through in life, you know, with a friend of mine who had lost hope and lost that glimmer. And I think for COVID, there's a lot of us too that regardless of how hot the housing market and the stock market are, I think a lot of people are in fear right now and suffering and full of financial fear and worry. And I'm not saying that any of those things are easy. But if we join together and if out of this we build community, that will be a beautiful thing. I made a brand new great friend today. That's a victory for today, right? And
Likewise, man.
yeah, you know, I have no wisdom, but I'm lucky to have wise friends around and people like Jimmy Franzo, who we were talking about with George. And you know, a lot of people out there who, when you're down and out and you can see that there's a guy or a woman who's willing to help someone no matter whatever they're going through, it makes me know that the world's not such a cold and scary place as it can seem sometimes. You know?
Well, on that note, that wraps up another episode of the King's Couch podcast show. I'm your host, Sulo King.
Love you, brother.
George
Thank you.
Jimenez.
George, I love you so much.
And our special
Love you,
guest today,
family.
Donal Logue. We can't thank you enough, Donal.
Love you guys, and love to your family, George, and your son and everybody else. I know that there's stuff going on, and but man, thank you for having me. And George, God bless you. And I know you got to run, but I'll be talking to you later today, okay? If you want.
All right, for sure.
Sounds good, Donal.
Thank you, brother. Love
Thank you, man. We'll talk to you soon. Take it
Okay.
easy, brother.
Bye-bye.
Bye.